I'd like to take your minds back for a few moments, back to the time of the Roman Empire. And as you think about that, there is a very special way that the Roman government used to honor particularly successful conquering generals. And what they would do is they would arrange for a triumphal procession through the streets of the capital. And what they would do was they get dressed in their finest, and they'd bring along some of the more prominent captives in chains, and these men would parade through the streets. And as they did that, they would make their way up to Capitoline Hill. And all along the way, of course, people of the city would be out there hanging out the windows and on the balconies and standing in the streets. And as they were doing that, they'd be throwing flowers out into the street and burning perfumed incense. And as the soldiers walked along through this, they would smell that fragrance, and the people in the street would smell it. And, they would realize through this triumphal procession and through the fragrance that was emanating throughout the city because of this, that the empire was safe. So it was something very special to them. However, if you were part of the enemy that was chained and walking through the streets, you too smelt the flowers and you smelt the incense. But it didn't mean the same thing to you. Because you knew that when you got to the end, it was going to mean death for you. Now you might wonder why I'm talking about this. But it's because Paul used that as a symbol or as an illustration of something that was to reflect what Jehovah God would do with his people in a spiritual way. So how would you like to take your Bible and turn to 2 Corinthians chapter 2? And we're going to read together starting in verse 14 and see how it is that Paul used this. And by extension, brothers, this application reaches down into our day. In 2 Corinthians chapter 2 and verse 14, it says, "But thanks be to God, who always leads us in a triumphal procession in company with the Christ." You see, he's saying that just as had happened in the Roman Empire, that these generals, these conquering generals would have this triumphal procession through the streets, Jehovah God would lead his people in company with Christ as a triumphal procession. And he goes on to say, "And makes the odor of the knowledge of him perceptible through us in every place." So back there, the flowers and the incense were the perceptible odor. But in Jehovah's triumphal procession, it would be the people. And it would be the people bringing the knowledge of Christ. That would be the odor that would be disseminated into every place. So in verse 15 it says, "For to God we are a sweet odor of Christ among those who are being saved and among those who are perishing. To the latter ones an odor issuing from death to death, to the former ones, an odor issuing from life to life." So in comparison, we can see that Paul compared this as to what Jehovah was doing back there. And today, brothers, Jehovah's been leading his people since the beginning of this century, leading them in the United States, up into Canada, down into South America, across into Europe, and literally encircling the globe. He's parading his people. You might say if you look at it from the heavenly perspective, that he's parading them right under the nose of Satan and the demons and his entire system of things. And there isn't a thing they can do about it. But in the meantime, you see, our job is to continue to disseminate or make perceptible this knowledge in every place. So how do we do that? How do we fulfill this spiritual application that Paul was talking about here? Well, by making sure that we take every available opportunity that we have in order to talk to people about the good news of the kingdom. And of course, as God's people, we've traditionally done that door to door, haven't we? And that's a mainstay. That's an identifying mark we talked about on Tuesday night of Jehovah's people, the door to door witnessing. And Of course, from time to time, we have to make adjustments to that in order to really be effective and to get the good news perceptible in every place. And so Tuesday night as well, we talked about using the noon hour on Saturdays as a time for witnessing to people. And that's something we can do if we're not already doing, making sure that we use that time to our advantage. Or how about our Sunday service? Have we become Sabbath Christians? Do we say, oh, sorry, it's Sunday, I don't go in service? And yet, the brothers have spent a lot of time and effort in order to give us the freedom in this country to preach the good news on Sundays. And so it's one of the ways we can use to make the odor of Christ perceptible in every place. But brothers, there's other ways that we need to adopt if we're not already doing it in order to accomplish that. Take as an example, telephone witnessing. Have you begun to use the telephone in an effective way to reach people in your territory? It's an excellent way. Ones are able to contact return visits, talking to people on the streets where it's difficult to get them to give you their address. You can talk to them by asking for their telephone number. Excellent way to follow through in the ministry. There's been so much success on the telephone. One sister in our circuit was doing telephone witnessing, and when she talked to the lady, she said yes, she'd be interested in having someone call on her, so they followed it up, started a Bible study with the lady, and then as things sometimes go, the lady disappeared. She moved, and the sister didn't know where she went. Well, it wasn't that long after that, she was doing telephone witnessing again, and guess what? She found the lady again and started the Bible study all over. So the telephone is proving to be an extremely useful tool. One group of brothers and sisters were out one morning in the service, and they spent a great deal of time going from door to door, and they had so many knotted homes that they said, look, why don't we decide this evening to get the telephone numbers, and this evening we'll call these same knotted homes and see how we do. Would you like to hear how they did? And keep in mind, this was one evening. On one call, a woman who received a telephone call and was offered a Bible study by the sister said, well, yes, why don't you have someone come by and show me how this works? Another man who was contacted said, I really love your magazines, but I'm never at home. Not that he had to tell the brothers that. So they made arrangements to deliver magazines to him. One sister was unsure of what to say, so she simply invited people to the meeting the next day, and wouldn't you believe it? A lady says, oh, well, I'm not doing anything. Yeah, I'll come. And sure enough, the next day she came, and a Bible study was started with her. Another woman responded by saying that she was so grateful for the call. She said, I knew you were here earlier on today, but I couldn't come to the door. You see, I broke my back in an accident, and I'm in a bed, and I couldn't get to the door. But I'm so glad you called back. So, nice call. And one sister who was very timid, she said, I found that people treat me much more kindly on the telephone. Now remember, all of that happened in the same evening with the same group of publishers. You see, that's why telephone witnessing has become such a wonderful avenue to pursue in our ministry. So are you determined to try using the telephone in your witnessing? Would you like some suggestions as to what you can do to make it effective? Well, if you're taking notes, I'm going to give you some suggestions from the August 1993 Kingdom Ministry. Now, first of all, when it comes to preparing for your call, you may notice Sister LaRue sitting here at this table, and you notice she's sitting upright and straight because she wants to feel comfortable yet clear-minded, and she's got with her her witnessing material. She has her Bible. She has her Kingdom Ministry and her reasoning book. She has her presentation written out there, although what you may not know is that she's rehearsed it well, but she has it there to refer to. And that's something you can't do at the door, can you? How would you look if you pulled out a piece of paper and started to read from it? It'd be a little unusual for Jehovah's people today. But you can do that on the telephone. And, of course, she has her house-to-house record and all that she needs in order to make an effective call. Now, when you're making the call itself, something that you want to keep in mind, number one is be yourself. Have you ever gotten one of those telephone marketing canned presentations? You know, the one where you just want to go, and hang up because you can't stand the rattle that they go through? Well, we don't want to sound like that. So be yourself and smile. Now, why smile on the telephone? Well, because it comes through in your voice. That's why. So when you smile, you sound happy too. Now, something else you want to do right away is use your full name so that there's nothing in secret. And try not to say that you're phoning everybody. You know, when you say, I'm phoning everybody in your block, then it just kind of puts up barriers. It's much better if we tell people that we're phoning them personally. Something else, too, is make sure that you arrange your presentation to allow the householder to have a share in the discussion. And when they make a comment, find something to commend them for so that they feel like you've really listened to what they've had to say. And it's best for you to bring the conversation to a close. You see, if they have to push us off the telephone, then we've lost our effectiveness. So it's best for us to bring the telephone conversation to a conclusion. And, oh yes, don't forget, offer them some literature. And then, of course, you can send it by mail, usually, or you can offer to deliver it to them. In fact, one sister who had offered a lady to send a magazine by mail, the lady said, "Oh, you know what, I'm not able to get to the post office that often, so would you be able to deliver it?" The sister said, "Sure." So be sure to offer the literature. Now, would you like to watch in on a demonstration to see how we can use this effectively? But I want you to watch carefully so that after we see the demonstration, that you'll be able to tell me what you thought was effective about it. Let's listen in.
Hello.
Hello, my name is Diane LaRue. I'm calling you because I'm unable to come to see you personally. I'm interested in getting your opinion on a growing problem in the world today. Would you agree with me that there is a real rise in hatred in the world?
Oh, yes.
Why do you think there is so much hatred?
Well, I think that some of it has to do with what people are taught. But likely greed also fuels a lot of what happens. And then people strike back thinking they don't have any other alternatives.
That's very interesting. You are obviously a person that's given it some thought.
Well, it's hard not to think about it when you hear so much of it on the news. Makes you wonder where it will all end.
I'd like to read you a quotation from a British TV journalist. She writes, "I'm not an Orthodox Christian, but I recognize in the teaching of Jesus a profound and absolute truth. Evil is a catastrophic absence of love. Do you think that if people were taught to love as Jesus intended, that people would treat one another better?"
No doubt about it. We need something for sure.
It's interesting that the Bible states at Colossians 3 and 14, "Clothe yourselves with love." That's obviously not an easy thing to do, is it?
No, it sure isn't.
I'd like to read you a short statement about why it's not easy. It says, "Nobody is born fully clothed, nor does anyone become clothed by simply talking about it. Likewise, nobody is born clothed with love. Just talking about it is not enough. Effort is required." Would you agree with this statement?
Yes, absolutely.
The magazine I just read from goes on to discuss how people can accomplish the task of clothing themselves with love the way Jesus intended. It also discusses a permanent solution to the problem of hatred in the world. I can tell that you're a person who would enjoy an end to that. May I deliver this magazine to you?
Sure, okay. That'd be fine.
And of course, she'll be sure to do that. Thank you very much, sisters. Okay, so what was effective about that presentation? Brother Smirchansky, please.
Well, the preparation was evident in that it was very conversational, and it appeared as if it was not read from a script, but that it was really aimed at that one individual.
Yeah, and Sister Slobodjan?
And when she raised questions to the householder, she commended her for her thoughtfulness, that she was thinking about these things.
Yeah, and that, of course, encouraged her to continue in the conversation, didn't it? So another hand here. Brother Gillis?
You could tell that she was very friendly.
Yeah. And Brother Poitras?
It was very structured, so even though she had a conversation with the householder, she knew which way she was going and pointing to a direction.
Yeah. So we can see by example that it's not difficult to do, but certainly can be effective in helping people to come to see the truth. And so if you didn't get it the first time, you can make note of the August 93 Kingdom Ministry that helps us with those points so that we can be effective when it comes to telephone witnessing. I notice we have quite a number of young ones here. How do you find witnessing at school? See, there's a place where you can get the knowledge of God into every place. It's kind of your private little spot, but it's not always easy, is it? We may not always feel comfortable about talking at school or witnessing or amongst our classmates. And yet, many have tried with tremendous success. One young sister in our circuit, 9 years old, took the opportunity to use an essay as an opportunity to witness. They were asked in their classroom to write about Terry Fox. I want to read to you what she wrote. And remember, she's 9 years old. She said, "I think it was very nice of him to try to run across Canada. I appreciate what he did. But as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, I do not think he is my hero because Jehovah is my God. And if I worshiped Terry Fox, I would be doing creature worship. And I don't do creature worship. I'm not trying to put anybody down or hurt anybody's feelings. I understand he tried his best. That's how I feel about Terry Fox." Beautiful, isn't it? Yeah. So simple, and yet, a real expression of how our young ones can defend the truth. So maybe you can try. If you haven't already, take opportunities with essays. One young sister was approached in her classroom. Some of the kids said to her, "Your religion is a religion of punishment." And she went, "What? Why do you say that?" He says, "Well, you don't get to celebrate any of the holidays, so you miss out on all the fun and the gifts." And oh. Well, when she told them that we can give gifts anytime, they went, "Really?" And they thought that was pretty good because they don't like the waiting. They thought that would be beneficial for them. And then it opened up a conversation with one young girl who said that her parents were having real trouble at home. And she was worried about it, that maybe the family would break up. So our young sister brought copies of the Young People Ask book, and she gave one to this young girl. When others in the classroom saw it, she ended up placing 4 of those and a copy of your youth book, the red one, the old youth book. And she was very happy that she was able to get conversations started. So how difficult is it to get a conversation started at school? Well, it could be very simple, and it can happen very quickly and doesn't have to take a lot of time. In fact, we're going to watch in on a demonstration to show you how quickly and easily it can happen, but you have to watch fast. It won't last long. Let's listen in.
Hey, Nick, did you hear that they're planning to hook up the internet to the computers in the school?
Really? That's great. I hear it'll be really fun that we'll be able to surf the internet. Actually, my sister said that you can get information and talk to people from all around the world.
I'd actually just read an article on that, and, I'm not really that familiar with the internet, but the article was really informative. Like, did you even know that there can be some real drawbacks to the internet?
Not really.
This article went on to show that the internet isn't as beneficial as they often say it is, and I'm finished reading it now, and if you'd be interested, I'd offer it to you.
Sure.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. So it doesn't have to take very long, a subject that others are interested in, and you were just reading about it. It can be that simple. But you know what it does is it spreads the fragrant knowledge of God in every place. And when we're willing to do that, of course, we also receive the joy and happiness that comes along with it. Sometimes, though, we feel a bit shy, maybe even at times a little inadequate. And yet, notice what Paul went on to say, if you still have your Bibles open, at 2 Corinthians chapter 2. The latter part of verse 16, Paul asks an interesting question. He says, "And who is adequately qualified for these things?" That is, for being able to make the knowledge of God perceptible in every place. Who's adequately qualified? Verse 17 says, "We are." And you know why we are, brothers? Well, just turn over the page to chapter 3 and verse 4 and notice what it says. "Now through the Christ we have this sort of confidence toward God. Not that we of ourselves are adequately qualified to reckon anything as issuing from ourselves, but our being adequately qualified issues from God, who has indeed adequately qualified us to be ministers." You see, Jehovah is equipping us. And so through parts like this, through our service meeting, through the pages of the Watchtower, we continue to be given effective help, brothers, to be able to do just that, to disseminate the truth in every place. And isn't it good to know that as Jehovah continues his triumphal procession, he's bringing us and parading us under the nose of Satan the devil and his entire system, and he can't do anything about it. And so what we want to do is to disseminate this fragrant odor of Christ by being willing to talk to people wherever we can find them. Make it your aim to use the telephone in your ministry. Look for people wherever they are. Allow Jehovah God to train us so that we can do his work and find the joy and happiness that comes from it. Well, what we want to do at this point, brothers, is invite Brother Farquhar to the platform. He's going to conduct our book study for us. So if you'd like to take out your family happiness book, he'll be looking to entertain your comments.